live yet or not? Okay. All right, folks. Welcome to Port Stephens Live. We are alive. We've survived the COVID crisis, and I couldn't say it's business as usual, but it's business. Back to business again. So, welcome to Port Stephens. So we're heading out to the Humpback Highway, and the whales, the humpbacks, have begun running a couple of weeks ago. We saw a few of the early starters, but they're now starting to come through in much bigger numbers. It's always very interesting at the early part of the whale season. We've been conducting whale watching for 25 years this year, a quarter of a century, a long time to do anything. And of course, during that time, we've seen the population of humpbacks on the East Coast grow tremendously. In fact, they're growing in a recovery phase. Science tells us that most animal populations that have been decimated for various reasons, once whatever that threat was that caused the collapse of the population is gone, they start to breed quite quickly in the recovery phase. We never quite understood what the total biomass was of humpbacks because whalers started pretty early in the the 1800s, and of course didn't finish until 1986 when the moratorium on whaling basically took effect. When Russia stopped sending their pelagic whaling fleet down to the Southern Ocean, the population started to bounce back. But there were estimated to be less than 300 animals on the East Coast, humpbacks, in 1986. Literally, the Russian fleet returned empty-handed that year, and that was when whaling basically finished. Australia, like most countries with the seaboard, was a whaling country. We stopped whaling and made it illegal in our waters in 1978. And of course, Australia has been a leader in whale conservation in the world ever since. But now the humpbacks, when we began whale watching in 1995, 1996 season, there were about 1,500 humpbacks estimated by National Parks and Wildlife Service of New South Wales, about 1,500 whales. Today, we are expecting over 37,000 humpbacks to be making their way along the east coast of Australia. And something very similar on the west coast is happening too. We're very lucky in Australia. We actually have the world's two largest populations of humpbacks, probably the two largest populations of great whales anywhere. And we love our humpbacks. And of course, although the best way of seeing them is out on a boat, like Imagine, you can see them fairly regularly along most of the headlands along the east coast, because the whales actually come in fairly close along our shoreline to avoid the East Australian current, which is that warm current, the EAC, that eddies down the east coast from the Great Barrier Reef. It's driven by the huge Pacific pump. The Pacific Ocean, being the largest mass of anything on the planet, generates all of the major currents that eddy around the world's oceans. So the East Coast current is driven by that east to west Pacific pump and flows down our coast. The whales have to avoid that current to make headway, because sometimes it is actually flowing at about 3 to 4 knots, which is roughly 8 kilometers an hour. The whales don't swim much faster than that, but by coming in close along our shoreline, our beaches and headlands, the whales manage to get out and avoid most of that current, and indeed pick up a slight cold countercurrent, which is going north along our beaches. So we're heading towards Point Stevens, and almost exactly 250 years ago to this month, or last month, on the 11th of May 1770, Captain Cook came sailing along our coastline and named Port Stevens and Point Stevens, which is where we're heading, right up in front of us, Point Stevens. And it was named after Sir Philip Stevens, who was the first Lord of the Admiralty back in 1770. And interestingly enough, of course, James Cook, on his voyage of discovery to Australia, named Port Jackson and Sydney and Botany Bay, of course. But when he started heading north, he didn't really see anything much worth naming until he got to Port Stevens. So I'm sorry, those of you in Newcastle, he didn't name Newcastle. So, but he did name Port Stevens after the most important member of the British Admiralty, Sir Philip Stevens. So I suppose we are somewhat honoured here. Now we do have some whales over on our port side, about 2 nautical miles away. But we're going to head up to Point Stevens first, and then we'll go north along the Humpback Highway. So let's settle down and watch. We're looking for that telltale blow, as in she blows, and or a splash. If a 40-ton humpback jumps out of the water, it makes a splash you can see for miles. Okay, so up ahead of us, Point Stevens. You'll see the old light station there, just sticking up above the headland. Point Stevens is what brought me to Port Stevens originally. Back 30 years ago, I was the last caretaker of the old lighthouse, and I had a contract with the National Trust of New South Wales to look after the building. It's like most lighthouses today, it's automatic. This one is solar supplied power, but it was one of the first lights built in the colony in 1861. In fact, I believe it's most certainly the longest continuously operating light on the east coast of Australia. The first light was the Hornby light inside Sydney Harbour, but no longer functioning. But this lighthouse, fantastic building made out of Hawkesbury River sandstone, prefabricated in the Hawkesbury River in the early 1860s, and then shipped up here. The notorious Fingal Spit. Bit hard to see, but there is a tenuous stretch of sand joining Fingal Island to the mainland, and it's called the Narrow Gut or Fingal Spit. It didn't exist. When Captain Cook came sailing past in 1770. It was, Fingal Island was actually part of the mainland, but in about 1890, a huge gale known as the Maitland Gale washed out the Fingal Spit, and it never came back in permanently. It's been always 5 nautical miles north. Still lots of any other part of Australia's coastline except that notorious stretch of water between Australia and Tasmania, Bass Strait, which has a fearsome reputation with lots of shipwrecks. But this was second to Bass Strait, and the construction of the lights at Seal Rocks and Point Stevens was part not only of protecting shipping, but as an early warning should Australia be attacked by unfriendly powers. The light here was connected to Sydney via a telegraph line, which went all the way from this lighthouse to Morpeth and then down to Sydney. So anyone living in the bay in the early 1800s, or the late 1800s I should say, if they wanted to make contact with Sydney, had to walk all the way over to the lighthouse. And at that time they could walk, but up until 1890 when the Spit was washed out. All right, well, we're bowed out in the Humpback Highway now, so looking. So although humpbacks are the predominant species of whale that we see, we do see lots of other types of cetaceans. And yesterday we were lucky enough to see a minke whale, a female with a calf. Now minke whales are the smallest of the whales that are filter feeders. They used to be seen in huge numbers along our coastline. They are the whale that Japan has continuously targeted with its whaling ships. Japan refused to comply with the International Whaling Commission's moratorium and has over many years continued to send whaling ships down. They did desist in whaling on humpbacks, and that was largely as a result of Australian government's demonstrations against it, because the humpback has become an economic focus for Australia's tourist industry along our coastline. There are lots of little villages and towns along both east and west coast of Australia that have become heavily dependent upon whale watching during the winter months, which historically have been a downtime in tourism. So the humpback whale is now seen as a generator of well over $300 to $400 million a year to tiny little coastal communities like Nelson Bay at Port Stephens. So thankfully the Japanese have promised us that they're going to leave humpbacks alone. We consider these whales Australian whales because they've all been born in Australia's waters, and so we're somewhat attached to our humpbacks. Very friendly animals. Despite their massive size, they are really friendly, quite benign, not prone to attacking any boat. So it's still fairly early in the season. 1st of June is really the official opening of the Wales season. We have been seeing a few front runners over the last week or two, but the main run begins pretty much from now until the end of July. It will build up, so by the end of June there will literally be hundreds of humpbacks passing along our coast every day, and it's quite a sight to behold. Because it's mating season, the boys and girls are pairing off, and there's a lot of malarkey goes on, bit of jumping around, bit of competition. The boys like to show how big they are by splashing around. So over the next 3 months, those female humpbacks that successfully conceived last year will be giving birth in the warm tropical waters of the Great Barrier Reef. We do see some born along our coastline, but most of the baby humpbacks are born up in those nice warm waters, which make it much easier for females. So we're looking for that telltale blow, or a bit of a splash if the whale jumps out of the water. Sometimes they wave their long pec fins. The pectoral fin of the humpback is the longest side fin of any of the great whales, and it's an amazing length. It can grow to up to 5 meters in length, and because they spend a lot of time down in the cold water putting on weight, their food they derive mainly in the Southern Ocean of krill, so they put on weight and then they swim north. Now of course the water here is today is 19.8 degrees centigrade. Where they've come from in the Southern Ocean, it's near freezing. So they're swimming virtually 24/7, and they warm up. So in order to cool down, they will often roll over and lift those great long pec fins, literally their arms, out of the water and wave them around. And it does look like they're waving at us, but in fact they're using them like a heat exchanger to cool down. They pump massive blood flow up through those fins and wave them around in the air, and as the water evaporates it strips heat out of the animal, because otherwise they could overheat on this long journey. It's a 10,000 kilometer round trip for many of the whales, and a long journey, and they don't really eat much along the way. They might snack a bit if they do see something worth eating, but in order to make it attractive for a humpback to open its mouth, which alone costs it quite a bit of energy, they want to know that they're going to get more energy in than expending through all of that lunge feeding that they often do. So we don't see much feeding going on, but if they were to see a big school of prawns, they might have a shot. Krill, their staple, is a little crustacean, and about as big as your little finger, and they'll eat many tons of krill during those summer months in the Antarctic, and put on up to 200 millimeters of fat all over the major part of their body, and it is that fat reserve that they burn on this massive journey to the Great Barrier Reef and back again. Okay, we've got something up in front of us here, about 150 metres away, at about 11 o'clock. So not too sure yet what it is, but let's go and have a look. Okay, we're a bit lucky off Port Stephens. We have quite a number of islands, which is unique in New South Wales. There's not too many spots where there are particularly accessible islands. So we talked about Fingal back behind us, but up to the north is Broughton Island, which is really itself a collection of islands. And Broughton Island is the largest of our coastal islands. It's not as big as Lord Howe, but that's not really a coastal island. That's 250 miles off the coast of Port Macquarie. But a magnificent island, Broughton. It is like all of the islands in the national park system, and Broughton is in the Mile Lakes National Park. There is a camping site on the island, and a very beautiful national parks camp. You can book it online, I believe. At the moment, I think it's closed because of COVID, but I'm sure it will be opening up before summer, and you can book trips online. Imagine through another affiliate boat, Envision, with Aquamarine Adventures, does take people out to the island, snorkeling and bushwalking. Fantastic island, lots of lovely beaches. Has a colony of little penguin, which is the smallest of the world's penguin species. It's the northernmost colony of breeding colony of penguins on the east coast, and you can see them late in the afternoon around sunset or early morning as the sun rises, coming out of the water or going into the water. Now, this is probably a whale because if it was a dolphin, we'd be seeing it by now. So when the humpbacks travel, they tend to come to the surface for 4 or 5 breaths over a period of about 5 minutes, which is, of course, when we get to see them. Then they'll sound, which is nothing to do with making a noise. They'll dive and swim underwater for a similar amount of time, somewhere between 4 and 10 minutes. So we just got to wait patiently. Okay. Now we're wave watching now. Okay, here we are on our port side. So looking over on our left side. Yep.
so I can run up the front. Should I run up the front? They're over there.
Okay. So there he is, looking up towards Broughton Island. Looks like maybe two. Pairs of whales are the most common grouping that we tend to see. No surprise on that, because there are females travelling with calves of last year and the year before, and of course there are boys and girls are pairing off. Little hard gazing into the sun at the moment, but we'll try and swap over, or at least get them out of that sun glare as soon as we can. So there is social distancing for whales. 100 metres is a required distance, but of course whales are not under threat from whaling anymore, and quite often we find they're curious about boats. And these are big-brained mammals, so they are often tempted to come up and check us out, particularly the youngsters. It's rather pretty backdrop there of the mountains just inland from Port Stephens. Sort of silhouette of that beautiful tail as it lifted up above the water. Oh yeah, I'd say. Thank you. Yeah, yeah. I've had to put my sunglasses on. It's a bit bright today. That's it. We're all brightening up after COVID. So we're all getting used to something's happening with the sound. Oh. Okay. Something's we're all getting used to new social distancing rules with COVID. I think we're going to need therapy at the end of all this to get back together again. This will be all right. I'll just protect it. Okay, so looking inshore of us. Here we go. Here we go. All right, I think we've got their course now. They're coming up a little closer. So we're going to keep our social distance. But when they come up close like this, we just make sure we shut down and slow right down, and they can find their way around us. Okay, he's coming in for a look. So, like I mentioned, sometimes they get quite curious. They think, well, we're heading in the same direction. So we make sure the props aren't turning, and we'll let them come in. We call it mugging in the industry. Sometimes they'll spend ages just hanging out around us, and never know quite where they're going to pop up next. So we just sit quietly here and wait and watch. Right behind us, he's now passing on our starboard side. So that's a juvenile humpback, and the juveniles are often the most inquisitive. It's sort of he's not on the surface yet. Really hard on that dog, all sorts of trouble. All right, well, we're going to track along now. I think he's headed out in front of us. Well, it doesn't have a windsock on it. We have a fairly sophisticated camera on a long pole up on the foredeck. You'll be seeing some of those shots, but it's difficult to drive, and so we're learners. We should have L plates on us actually, so. So there is a little bit of a feeding event happening up ahead of us. I'm watching gannets diving in the water. Now, that can indicate that there's a lot of surface fish and both gannets. There's the whale just in line with that bulk carrier on the horizon over there on our starboard side, about 100 meters away. But yes, gannets and common dolphin often feed on the same type of prey fish, and so we'll keep a good eye out for common dolphin because they are real fun. Of all the cetacean species that we see around our shorelines, the common dolphin are probably the most sociable. So we're tracking along with the whale. Seems to be on his own. So, and by the size of his tail, that usually indicates he's too old to be with his mum, but he's not old enough really to be in the mating game. So he's tagging along at a discreet distance. He could still have his mother a few miles away. So if we talk about miles and you're not familiar with miles, at sea we tend to talk about nautical miles, which is roughly 2 kilometers. There he is. We've got about 20 or 30 gannets hitting the water in front of us. Gannets are the biggest diving bird in Australia. Most of them are born over the ditch in New Zealand, off the coast of New Zealand, and then they come over here to feed. They hit the water at about 30 kilometers, 40 kilometers an hour, and they can dive down 5 or 6 meters. They love pilchards, sardine. Certainly a lot more gannets coming in here now. So they're onto something. Probably pilchards. Not seeing any dolphins yet, but when they hear the gannet smacking into the water, if there are dolphins around, they'll sometimes come straight in. Look at the speed of them hitting the water. It's all going on out here today. Port Stephens live. right. Well, let's keep going. Fantastic to see. Some years ago, in fact, not long after Imagine started whale watching, we had a tragic pilchard kill around the coast of Australia. The West Australian pilchard population were probably the most fish anywhere in Australia, but a virus got into the population, probably from there's the whale over on our right again, just surfacing, tagging along with us. But yes, these pilchards, the population collapsed. Almost 70% of Australasian pilchards died from this disease, and it was pretty evident that a virus had got into the pilchard population from some other population of pilchards that I think were brought in by the tuna ranchers from America, and that virus seemed to go through the Australian pilchard population, and it was a tragic thing. We lost thousands of little penguin, either died of starvation or migrated further south, and an unknown amount of nature suffered the penalty from the loss of an important part of the food web. But I have noticed that there's been somewhat of a recovery of the pilchard population, so good news for the animals that are dependent on the pilchards. And of course, whales, minke whales are fish eaters, and the population of minke whales had collapsed, but it does seem to be a little bit of a recovery. You can see those smooth patches on the surface, known as the footprints of the whale, as he comes up to take a breath. That huge bulk changes the surface of the water. The old early whalers thought they were leaking whale oil out as they traveled along, because if you pour oil on the water, it develops a smooth patch, but we know that's not the truth. There he goes, a sounding dive. When you see that tail fluke lift up above the surface, that usually indicates the whale is about to dive for a while and disappear for a few minutes. Okay, well, we might leave this little fella. He's tracking along nicely. We could always come back and see him, but I am fairly certain we've got quite a few more whales up ahead. I'm looking up about 3 or 4 nautical miles ahead of it. In over the last couple of days, because as we're going into winter now, the weather can change quite dramatically, and in a day or two we've got a change of weather systems coming. Oh, that was a breach right up ahead, miles away, but as I mentioned before, a whale makes a pretty big splash and you can see him a long way away. Quite a pot of whales up ahead of us. There are these 3. Oh, another breach in the distance. This is looking good. Maybe you can get the pole camera up ahead of us. No, I'm good. Okay. Yep. So we're heading north. So heading north along the Humpback Highway. We just had another breach out in front of us, long way. So we're going to keep going. There's a blow. Got about a mile to go yet. Should just catch them. These guys are, they've got their foot down. So as you can see, they're basically heading from headland to headland, all right, and heading up to warm tropical waters, crossing the border, which is as yet closed, mere mortals. Yeah, so there's at least 2 or 3. There is on our port side, but quite a way inshore, but we're sort of heading up towards the ones that seem to be most active. We love our whales, but we love the active ones. Of course, whales, like all mammals, have to rest, and they'll do that at any time of the day. They'll catch a nap. A little bit different to us humans because they have to think about breathing all of the time. They're conscious breathers, whereas we tend to be automatic or autonomic. We don't think about breathing unless we're in the water. Whales are in the water all the time, so they have to think about it. And they can swap their breathing function from one hemisphere of their brain to the other. Slow down during that time, and might actually stop and just lie on the water. It's sometimes called logging. Okay, we had a bit of a tail slap over on our left side there. Keep an eye on that because these whales. Okay. Okay, so we've got whales in front, whales to the left of us, behind us, and they're starting to get a bit active over there. Yep. All right. Well, I think given the timing, we might go and have a look at these ones on our left side. We're part of the for a sunny day. So when a whale hits the water, not only does it make a big splash, but it quite a noise that travels underwater. Oh yes. So we've got so there's every chance that this little group of whales is communicating with the whales up to the north through fishing. And sound travels very fast through the water and huge distances. Whales do sing, and that singing, we'll drop our hydrophone in the water at some point today, but the singing was always thought possibly was mainly as part of the courting, but we have heard females singing to their calves as well, so it's not exclusively male karaoke. But there we go, that's a youngster coming out of the water there. We can go. Nice. Reasons suggested why all the great whales, the humpbacks, seem to be so active, and lots of reasons suggested, but getting their eyes up above the surface so they can have a look around. Idea they can hear us coming through the water, but underwater they can't see us at this distance. And also cleaning themselves. That percussion when they hit the water knocks off and whale lice that can accumulate. That I'm sure very irritating to the animal, but themselves clean. As the whales travel along, their fine layers of skin slough off, and of course breaching and jumping around and tail slapping accelerates that cleaning process. Oh, there we go. So the males are a little bit smaller for the same age. The girls, of course, have to not only make this huge journey off their fat supplies, but they have to feed their calves. Those that give birth wind up having to. That's looks to me like about a 1-year-old, and so is around. You got it. Fantastic. Of course, it all happens so quickly, and you're never quite too sure where they're coming out of the water and when. They all breach, but they don't give any. But once they have started, it is more common that they'll breach again. And of course, for the young whales, the juveniles, it helps build muscle. It takes 4 or 5 sweeps, giant tail, to lift them out of the water. The tail muscle alone weighs nearly half the weight of the entire animal's huge amount of power to launch the whale's body out of the water. It's fantastic. A lot of surface time here, which is good for us. Particularly the big hold their breath for over 10 minutes at a time when they're swimming underwater, and that can become a little bit boring. The juvies like this one are up more regularly. They don't have such big lung capacity. in line with the northern part of Bar. So he's gone down for a sounding dive. Okay. So of course now I've said that he's been spending a lot of time on the surface. He's probably going to spend it down, but just to prove me wrong. Fantastic. Sun's come out. Lovely day. There's weather, but it's crackerjack day. Oh, here he goes now. It's a head lunge. That's a very male thing. And it cleaning off underneath his chin, any barnacles that tend to grow. I'm going to slow down here because he's coming in for a look at us. I'm still not seeing his mother surfacing anywhere, but she's probably in the vicinity. Here he comes. Up goes his tail. He may be old enough to be away from his mum. This guy, look, he could be 2 years old. Usually when they're less than 2, their mum's really close around because you're still dependent upon mum's milk. But this guy, now we're a little close, is he could be a little bit more than 1. They actually have one juvenile in the port a couple of days and 2 days in the port. Gave us all a nice view going around the beaches. Oh, look at that one just. I don't know. Here we go. We're getting. So the seagulls are following this guy because as he's moving along, they're stitching, and he knocks off barnacles and little bits of flesh. Okay, yeah. I think these guys are to each other through the water. See, as your eyes adjust, there's whales all around us. Not sure where this young fella is, but he's around here somewhere. Oh, there he is. He's starboard side. What a fantastic thing. There are not many success stories in conservation like the recovery of the humpbacks. Not all whale populations have recovered as well as the humpbacks, particularly some in the northern hemisphere where there's quite pollution, both shipping traffic and noise and actual physical pollution in the waters. We're so lucky here, and it is a success story. This little guy's powering along just under the surface. You'll see the colour. There he goes, tail up. That's a sounding dive. He may be gone for a little bit, but he may also become going to throw a breach, because he has been. There is an increased chance that he might jump again. Like he's heading out towards a whale. We're looking up ahead of us out to sea. That could be his out there. It's a wonderful thing about a whale. They can go wherever they want. Not really very affected by the weather. And the interesting thing is we haven't seen many whales dying of old age. And we've wondered quite how long humpbacks do live for. But some of the great whales we do over 200 years. The right whale, the grey whales, bowhead whales. We do a bowhead whale that washed up or got caught, I think, by some Inuit Indian or some Eskimo. Found a whale harpoon in one that they dated for over 200 years. So we knew it must have existed back virtually in the late 1700s. So some of the whales definitely live long periods. We thought humpbacks might only live to about 60, but I think given that since whaling stopped over 40 years ago, I've seen very few whales die of old age. There is a good chance they might live certainly up around 90 to 100 years. Behind us a little bit, but we're going to have to sky fairly soon. I want to go and visit some seals and possibly some common dolphin. Oh, he's just throwing a tail lob, so maybe we'll just have one last look at him before we head inshore. So humpbacks really have one serious predator apart from man, and thankfully we've stopped. But killer whales will predate on particularly young humpbacks. So haven't sails around this season yet, but there are pods of killer whales. They work together like a pack of wolves. Obviously humpbacks are a bit nervous of killer whales and they can hear them through the water. Crystal clear day. Been amazing since COVID. Of course, no traffic. The jet stream that often has amount of contract from aircraft just not there anymore. So everything's so clear. Been fantastic. Hopefully the planet's having a bit of a reprieve from the heating up of our environment, which as a result of industry. should be fairly close to us when he comes up next. Mm.
That's why the horizon is at that angle.
All right.
But I don't know if we could lean it back a little bit more.
We could.
That's why when it's leaning forwards, that's why when we lift it up to get that like thing.
Oh. Yeah, no, I can bend it back a bit by bringing two guy ropes, two stays down to the back end of the canopy there.
That little black thing would be higher.
Yeah, you're right. Well, he's using his lung capacity here at the moment. All right. There you go. Well, he seems to have gone a bit into a swimming, breathing pattern, so we may have had the best of his jump activity. Fantastic little whale, maybe 1 or 2 years old, and looks like he is heading towards a little pod of whales up a couple of miles. So we're going to start heading into the islands, see whether we can pick up some common dolphin, go and have a look at a colony of fur seals. So we'll say goodbye to our little humpback, wish him well on his journey, him on the way back down later in September and October. So we'll keep a lookout for more whales on the way, because some inshore closer to the beaches, but we'll say goodbye to him. Well, that was pretty good. Can we use one of them?
Why would you do that when we could look at that? I don't understand. But anyway, we use the makeup.
Yeah. Yeah. So as we're heading inshore towards Cabbage Tree Island, we're passing Little Island on our left here, and Cabbage Tree is a unique island, and we'll have a closer look at that as we head in, because it's the only rainforested island along the coast of New South Wales, and it's also home to Australia's rarest endangered seabird, Gould's petrel. But I'm hoping that we'll find some dolphins along the way. We've been looking at cousins, and now it'll be fun to see whether we can find some dolphins, because you never know where they're going to pop up. They use all of the coastal waters around here. Port Stephens is famous for its population of bottlenose dolphin. Little bottlenose, they're a bit smaller than their oceanic counterparts, the bigger Tursiops truncatus oceanic bottlenose. They don't come into the bay, but the dolphins inside the bay are subspecies, the Tursiops odoncus. But right up on the horizon ahead of us, I'm not sure whether you can see it, but there's mountain ranges there over the back, Mile Lakes and the Mile River, which flows down into the port. But right in the distance, about nautical miles distant, are the Barrington Ranges, and often you can't see them because they're in the mist. The clarity, perhaps more recently, we've been experiencing because of the COVID crisis. Looking at the Barrington Mountains, Barrington's is where the Mile and the Karua River both have their tributaries. And the interesting thing about the Barringtons is that much of the area of that particular national park is it's the Gondwana rainforest, the subalpine rainforest, that is pretty much today was 40 million years ago when Australia was joined to the Antarctic. And that ancient rainforest we seen up there is where both the Karua and the Mile River have their origins, and particularly the Karua that flows down through the Whispering Valley. It's a stunning area to walk through. So just beautiful to be able to see the entire catchment of the estuary. Port Stephens itself is the largest natural harbour in New South Wales. It is a flooded volcanic river valley, and behind those sand dunes up in front of us, the Mile River, and a very beautiful unspoiled area. It flows down through the Mile, just a pristine area. Drive the centre of, can fly into Newcastle Airport, only 20 minutes down the road. We are very, very lucky to have this virtually a pristine area, lovely beaches. So Cabbage Tree Island, right up in front of us, is now home to the most colony of fur seals along the east coast. 25 years ago, we really didn't see many seals, although a lot of seals in the early days of the colony, because the next major point of land north of the port, Seal Rocks, so there must have been seals. But unfortunately for the poor old fur seal, it was literally Australia's first commodity. More than 370,000 fur seals were slaughtered for their fur pelts, exported back to the UK and Europe long before wheat and wool and coal. The fur seal for Australia. Sure, it didn't want to. So the seal population, particularly along the east coast, collapsed. But of course there are precies today, and about 24 years ago we started seeing a few seals, and then they started hauling out on a particular island. And nowadays, during the winter, we see up to 30 seals. We saw about 30 seals. They've started arriving now. And last summer was about the first time we saw a couple of seals actually over. Usually in the summer months, they all take off and go back south. But this couple of them, so that felt very hopeful that we might get a permanent colony of fur seals, a bit like Montague Island, Narooma. So we're going to poke our nose into gully here on this northern side of the island and see whether we can say g'day to a few of our furry friends. Seals are pinnipeds. Even though they are marine mammals, they come down a strand of evolution than dolphins that do share a common ancestor. These guys, the bear, the brown bear of the northern hemisphere, fairly close relative. And when you seals, their muzzle, whiskers, and fur, love eating fish. They're choppers. They're fun right on the. Oh, jumped in. Excellent. So these are amazing animals because even though they're really good swimmers, they're not bad climbers. It looks a bit as they're clambering out over some of the barnacles, but there's one sitting down there sunbaking. They love sunning themselves, and then they jump in off. So we've got a couple over on our port side there, and some up high. There's a couple right up really high. Seals. A bit of a mix. The scientists that have been looking at this population are uncertain of their gene. Some are probably Australian fur seals, and some are probably New Zealand fur seals. They're pretty similar, and I think they mix up pretty well. The only thing the Australian fur seals eat fish, and the New Zealand fur seals eat fish. Come on, go for a dive.
Go on.
Yeah, there he goes. Do the Australian crawl. You can see why the Europeans love their nice brown coat, tiny. Fat down a bit like the whale oil for lamp oil, and maybe their flesh was eaten. I don't know. Well, that's fantastic. Well, I think there's about 8 here at the moment, but I'm expecting a pile more. It's a beautiful volcanic island. All right, let's go aside and spot it. What a day. And now find some trifecta. You can see a few seals lying here, self-isolating. They can grow pretty big. The males can get up to meters in length and over 300 kilos in weight. So they're very muscular, heavy. They look so uncomfortable.
As far as I can see now. It's as far out as I can see. They're very close.
Amazing watching them clamber up one of those rocks because their back legs were a land mammal. They've water here. I mean,
Right there. Right there. Thank you.
yep. There he swim around, cooling off. Wonderful. See, 20 degrees, so warm. Sure. Annual holiday. It's a great place to have a quick plug. Port Stephens. Your annual, along with allowed support businesses we've been doing at home. We've been having a struggle here, obviously, for the last weeks. Lockdown, all we've been doing is gardening, chores. Didn't realise there was so many chores to do on the house. I think I was better at killing plants, growing them, but anyway. We sat and had our meal in a restaurant. Favourite Chinese. Oh, second meal. That's right. We had a castle the other day. I guess I should consider myself very blessed that I didn't poison with my own cooking. Are the pubs open today? I think they are. So as we swing around this western side of Cabbage Tree Island, also known as the John Nature Reserve, it was the British ornithologist John Gould that discovered this unique little seabird that only is one island in the entire world. Flies in from the northern hemisphere for his annual holiday on the forest floor under the understory. So there probably would have been a lot more coastal forest many years ago, but colonial settlement and of course a lot of logging. Rainforest doesn't, unlike the sclerophyll eucalypt forests, the gum trees that we're more familiar with on the mainland, which is only a mile away. Rainforest doesn't like that repetitive firing of the bush, which has been very common, not just, of course, since colonial settlement, but the tradition is fire to manage the coastal environment. So what we're looking at here is very little eucalypt on this island. It's 7 different of rainforest fig. So this is rainforest, coastal rainforest. Palms, which are part of that rainforest, very slow growing. Most of these palms will be over 400 years old. The forest floor under the understory of 50 at one are up over 12. Right up over the top, see there's a couple of eagles. The white sea eagle is Australia's largest raptor, and nearly every island, hill and headland has got at least nesting sea eagles on it. Summer we come an hour in this little interesting underwater with corals and a whole mix of fish, even tropical fish we're seeing here. Unique forest. Island along our coast of New South Wales where you'll see this type of forest. Beautiful spot. Cabbage tree palm got its annuals. The traditional owners cutting the young cabbage tree. Eating. They said it looked like. There you go. Didn't like it. Water looks nice and clear, doesn't it? Now let's see if we can go and find some of our bay dolphins. Going over towards Yakabar, and Yakabar is the highest of the coastal peaks, and I believe it's actually the oldest, so some 3 million years old. Just like that, down to the south of the entrance, Tomaree. Are in the marine park system. So out to 3 nautical miles from Baroob Marine Park, the largest marine park south of the Great Barrier Reef, which is the world's largest marine park. So it's a fantastic spot, chosen to represent what's called the Manning bioregion. And the idea of marine parks is there are different zones of usage. At the top end, conservation, the sanctuary zones. So they are tiny areas that tend to give maximum protection, marine habitat, in the water, and that includes things like mangroves, mud beaches, shores, sandy beaches, islands, internal areas. There's a particular species of animal in those areas, grey nurse shark, in areas of Broughton Island, rocks. Those areas are given huge protection because it means you can't go fishing, whether it's spear fishing, commercial fishing. Those sanctuary zones represent 17% of this marine park. So not a very large amount, but those that are given total protection. You can go diving and sailing through them and photograph. You just can't take anything out of them. The other larger areas are general usage zones, so you can go fishing. There are areas called habitat protection zones, which are a bit like sanctuary zones. There can be some restrictions in those, but by and large, Port Stephens is a great place to go fishing, and as are open to recreational fishing. There are some more restrictions on commercial trawling in particular, but even that, a lot of fishing goes on at Port Stephens. The port was established by the colonial government in 1826 when the Royal Australian Agricultural Company took up a 1 million acre grant of land from the Crown. About 500 convicts here. The idea was to try and establish a major agricultural project, and they laboured away for about 40 years, but they weren't really very successful because the lands around Port Stephens didn't really lend themselves. Lobsters, the rock lobster. You'll see some floating buoys in the water around here. These are lobster crab pots, commercial. Beautiful clear water today, despite the fact that over the last couple of weeks it was mainly along the coast, so the water, the outgoing tide is still pretty clear. Fabulous for diving, lots of scuba diving, snorkeling goes on all year round in Port Stephens. Around the islands there's a great dive area where Let's Go Dive and Fit First Dive take folk to swim with grey nurse shark. So when we come around the corner of Yackabarra, I'm hoping we're going to find a few dolphins. Yesterday we had lots of dolphins, but so far today, nice whales, but no dolphins.
Now, if you've got bookings this afternoon, you better check.
I think.
You can't run into
But,
3 hours without film.
well, we might be filming this afternoon.
Not going to run very busy.
I don't know what was up. I know. Yeah, I don't know. This morning, Ronnie didn't want us to run.
That'll be another time you're only running at 2. At least this morning you can justify with the film. Put them on to tomorrow morning. Water's amazing.
Isn't it clear?
Never seen it like that. Dolphins.
Okay. All right. Okay. Dolphins. not surfacing.
They're not surfacing. No.
Well, I don't know where they went, or him to be on his own. Dolphins have put bottlenose. Had 6 babies born this summer, most born in the warmer months. Obviously, fine. The young have higher level in the warmer months. A bit more for mum, as just like they suckle their young. So you'll see great similarity. Humpbacks we'll watch. That's because they do share a common ancestor. They are cetaceans, and that includes whales, dolphins, and porpoises. So we're lucky in Australia. We've got nearly half of species of cetaceans that live or visit our waters. And the little bottlenose, Tursiops aduncus, is the ones to inhabit our estuarine areas and the close coastal zones. So happy that we could show you some dolphins.
Yep, you're right.
Close. They tend to so there's around just a little over 100 that are considered resident to the bay. Some of them travel outside along the coastline a little way, and they are genetically related to a couple of pods, offshore pods. So they mix it up a bit. The gene pool is much bigger than the 106 dolphins that are in the port. Imagine has helped sponsor research on the dolphins over many years. The Marine Parks Association is running a census of dolphins. It's around about have our it's a steady population. Steady is good in the animal kingdoms. Only us humans that do like everything to be expanding. There's a boy in there with the girls. Fantastic. Well, that's it. We had the trifecta: whales, seals, and dolphins.
My country is back when it ended off.
All right.
This is my influence in the live.
Well, that was awesome.
Okay, so from here on, maybe
Okay, well, we're heading back into the bay, folks, and just passing Shoal Bay on our left, and Jimmy's Beach on our starboard side. So heading back into the marina. But that was a lovely day. Hope you enjoyed our first excursion with Port Stephens Live and the whales, and we'll do some more of that over the coming weeks. Thank you everybody for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. It was our big practice,
We're going now, everyone coming from this.
and we'll be going out again this afternoon, 2 trips a day, 10:30 and 2 o'clock every day, weather permitting, and hope you'll join us in reality rather than virtually. But if you can only see us from home, thank you for watching.